Please welcome Paige Cognetti, Scranton, Pennsylvania Mayor, Svante Myrick, Ithaca, New York Mayor, Randall Woodfin, Birmingham, Alabama Mayor, and Larry Platt, the Philadelphia Citizen co-founder.
Welcome, fellow citizens. I'm at the beautiful Fittler Club in Center City, Philadelphia. We'll be cracking open some of these bottles behind me after we're done. I am so excited about this panel. I have learned so much from watching and writing about these three young leaders. There is something going on in cities. They've become, at a time when the federal government is a shit show, they've become laboratories of experimentation and innovation. And we have the honor of being joined by three young new breed mayors, as you'll see, standing for principle, but also getting stuff done. So I'll quickly introduce them. Mayor Svante Myrick is the groundbreaking 33-year-old mayor of Ithaca, New York. Paige Cognetti is the 39-year-old independent mayor of Scranton, PA. She figured out a way to get around the old boys network there in Scranton. And Randall Woodfin, who has been with us before, is the 39-year-old mayor of Birmingham, Alabama. Can't thank you guys enough. Before getting into specifics of how you govern differently than mayors of like previous generations, I want to get a sense from each of you, just briefly, about how you got where you are. How did you become a mayor at such a, and I don't mean politically, but what in your life, where was the aha moment that you said, you know, I'm going to dedicate myself to public service?
Sure. Yeah, sure. And it's a real pleasure to be here, especially with two mayors I deeply admire, look up to, and steal ideas from all the time. So thank you both for your service. For me, it started really at birth. You know, I lived the first 6 months of my life in a homeless shelter and the first 8 years of my life in and out of homelessness. And coming face to face with that kind of poverty and desperation and fear, and coming face to face with government programs. Now, what is true of every American is that we're face to face with government programs all day, but only poor people do we make sure they know it and recognize it in their daily existence. And I remember I was always what I believe scholars would call a nerdy child. So I was reading a lot of books, and I remember I met my village mayor, where we eventually moved. I might have been 12 years old. This village was 800 people, right? And my house was the Black neighborhood. And I met the mayor of this village of 800 people, and he goes, we just bought the schoolhouse. Now, little did I know that the schoolhouse, they closed down, they had to consolidate, the building was sitting there empty, it cost more in repairs than the value of the building. Anyway, he says, the village just bought the school, guess for how much? I said, how much? He said, we bought it for $1. Now, 12 years old, I'm like, what? I have $1. Could I have bought the school? And I'm like, so, and then it really sent me down a strange and often lonely path of going to school board meetings and PTA meetings and even village council meetings. And when I went to Cornell University, eventually, I was actually this close to, I was going to take an internship with Senator Barack Obama and go work for somebody like that, because I didn't think that people like me were allowed to run for office. But a seat on the city council opened up, and I asked myself, what would Barack Obama do? And I thought, well, this is a guy who would run for it. And if he could run for it, I could run for it. So I got elected to the city council when I was 20 years old, mayor at 24. And now I've been in the job long enough. I'm in my third term. And I just met somebody, another mayor who shall remain nameless. But he said, when I met him, I said, oh, I'm the mayor of Ithaca. And he said, oh yeah, Ithaca had this young mayor. What happened to him? And he said, did you beat him or did he leave town? And I was like, all right, good to know. That's where we're at.
I was that young mayor, in other words, yeah.
That's what I was gonna say. Is like, this is what happens. It's like city miles on a car. You'll get there. But it was those deep beliefs. One, I thought that poverty in America was unnecessary, that there were ways to fix it. And two, I had a strange and nerdy childhood.
That's wonderful. Mayor Cognetti, how strange and nerdy were you?
What's strange probably about my journeys to this office of mayor of Scranton, Pennsylvania, is that I'm not from here. I'm from Oregon. I'm from the Willamette Valley, which is a very progressive bastion in the United States. Went to the University of Oregon, which is a place where people protest just as often as they eat lunch, and that's just part of kind of the way of life out there. It's also really boring politically, because save for a congressional seat out in the eastern part of the state, it's pretty much blue. And it's interesting in that you get different policies that maybe haven't gotten to a place like Pennsylvania even years later. But politically, I noticed when I was voting for the first time for president in 2000 that all the action, Florida aside, but all the action was on the East Coast or in swing states. And at that time, still Pennsylvania and Florida and Ohio. And it just felt like those were really interesting places. That wasn't my moment. That certainly influenced things, though. My moment was when I was teaching English abroad in Japan. It was March 2003, and I was in a room with about 60 teachers, Japanese, of just Japanese descent in Japan. I was the only foreigner, and we watched George Bush declare that we were invading Iraq. And I didn't agree with that decision. And the 60 people in that room with me were looking to me to understand why we would make that foreign policy decision. And I realized I wanted to have a say in what my country did abroad and domestically. So when I moved back in 2004, I set my sights on Washington, D.C. and moved in 2005. Made my way up to Scranton for my first campaign and met my now wonderful partner and father of my child. And we're fast forward 15 years, I'm the mayor and the first female mayor, which I don't think would have happened if not for a very unfortunate situation where we hit rock bottom here, where the former mayor is in federal prison for extortion and bribery. I think we finally hit a point where people were willing to look to somebody from the outside for some fresh perspective and maybe some more deliberate and energetic management.
Mayor Woodfin, what about you? What's your story?
Well, Larry, first, thanks for having me on. Shout out to Mayor Myrick and Mayor Cognetti. Big ups to Ithaca and Scranton. That both those cities have amazing leaders. I will say this. It kind of stumbled into like three different things. The first thing was a combination of my great-grandmother, who lived to be 100 years of age, and my mother. My mother took in everybody. My house was the home that all the family members could live in. So there were never less than 8 people, Larry. And my great-grandmother, who was blind from diabetes, I sat at her feet all the time, and I understood and learned the importance of listening more than talking. And you can help people if you understand their issues. I would say by the age of 15, I got my first job at a grocery store. So understanding the importance of helping others, serving others. I got that from bagging groceries, believe it or not, and walking those groceries out to the car of customers at age 15 and 16 and 17 years of age. And I would say by the age of 21, as a senior at Morehouse, a national publication asked me what did I wanted to be, who I wanted to be when I grew up. I said I wanted to be the mayor of my hometown, Birmingham. And the answer was quite simple. Morehouse taught me the importance of not only academic rigor, but really at the intersection of community service and leadership. It's important to go back home and give back and make a difference where you're from. And that's how I ended up here 3 years ago, November 28th, 2017.
And along the lines, all of you in some way or another have obviously been, and I do think this is generational, but I have been committed to governing from a perspective of customer service, it seems to me, focusing on making government more efficient and customer faced. And I wonder if you can speak to that and give me some examples of how you've done that. Let's begin with you, Mayor Woodfin.
I'll start with the basics. You mentioned the potholes earlier, but I just think about the average citizen where they live, on their block, on their street, in their neighborhood. They want their trash picked up on time. They want the pothole fixed. They want the sidewalk walkable. They want adequate playground equipment in the neighborhood park. They want the street light to work. Those are some basic things, right? And so if the trash is late, if someone calls 311, how we respond how we answer that call, and then making sure we actually pick that trash up. If there's an issue with the sidewalk or any other infrastructure issue, again, if they report that to 311, how we respond, catalog that information and respond back to them. I think you have to lead with customer service, because at the beginning and end of the day, all three of us as mayors, our core responsibility is public safety and public infrastructure. And there's certain things the private sector can't do. People pay for with their tax dollars. So by definition, they're, what do you want to call them, the customer or the resident. As the leader of the organization that's responsible for delivering the city service, we can't do it. We can't do it with in a mean way. We can't do it with an attitude. We can't do it just because it's our job. We're supposed to do it because we need to and have to do it, and we need to take care of our residents. And we should do it with a smile. We should do it with more efficiency, and we should do it with a sense of urgency, as well as good customer service, which includes respond to people.
I think that's so, it's self-evident, but it's so seldom done by governments. And Mayor Myrick, you did something that we wrote about. And when I read it, I was like, oh my God, that's so obvious. Why don't more people do it? Which is you provide childcare to citizens during your city council meetings, because you want to encourage people to show up and participate. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we had the same question. In fact, that gave me pause. Sometimes if you find out that no other city in the country is doing something, you think, well, there's probably a reason for that. Let's not do it. What we found out is that nobody does it because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Young parents don't show up to governmental meetings because they have childcare responsibilities. And so there's nobody at those government meetings saying, shouldn't we be providing childcare? It's like a feedback loop. And what Mayor Woodfin says is exactly right. You know, we created a website here where folks can not only track, they can submit a pothole to be filled, but they can track their favorite pothole. They get a notice when we receive the complaint. We get a notice when it gets put on the list. They get an email when it gets filled. And if any of those things take too long, it gets kicked up to their supervisor, up to me, because I believe what Mayor Woodfin said, which is that if, you know, will filling the potholes solve every problem in the world? No, but unless you can fill the potholes, you can't solve every problem in the world. Because if people lose faith in this collective activity that is called government, if they don't believe that the government can make their life better in even those small but important ways, how are they going to trust the government to negotiate a multilateral trade agreement, right? How are they going to trust the government to tackle climate change or global inequality or to save vulnerable populations from genocidal slaughter, right? So the moments when I, now 13 years in the public office, might be like, there's another pothole on 3rd Street. How do I keep that same smile? And Mayor Woodfin, I can't believe it. I bagged groceries and carried groceries out to cars from age 14 to 18 in high school. So there must be something about that kind of service that says, I'll carry other people's baggage for the rest of my life. But if you get tired of solving the small problems, you can remind yourself that by solving the small problems, you are helping folks at state, national, international level solve the large ones.
Mayor Cognetti, I want to hear from you on this customer service front, and also you had a tougher road to hoe because you came in, as you referenced earlier, as such an outsider. I forget what it was that school superintendent said to you, but it was, I can still feel the pat on the head.
Well, I laugh at the groceries because, well, I've never worked in food service. My husband is the owner of a market, but our household is service oriented. He owns the store. When people walk in, they don't know. I didn't know he owned the store when I walked in. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you're the owner or the mayor. We each scrub toilets at our own offices, and we make sure that everyone does their part and that there's no ego about these things, that this is, on his end, it's making sure people get what they need in terms of their food. And for me here, it's making sure that people get what they need in terms of services, and that we're running an inclusive government. This is a really funny moment for me too, because I just wrote the intro to our 2021 budget, and I just wrote I added in, we are running an inclusive government that's not based on political connections. And I think it's important that I say that again, because I think that's why I'm here. And I get really good feedback from people that's what we're doing. It does start with service. And as I know you all mayors know, and I'm newer to this than you, but it starts with you at the top, showing that you're willing to go there and do these things yourself if needed.
Well, you guys all had, and by the way, you all have done big, bold stuff, but you've also done little things that resonate. When Mayor Cognetti, when you talked about driving the car and doing your own gas, I thought of Mayor Myrick in his first term, first week. Correct me if I'm wrong. What'd you do with the mayoral parking spot?
Yeah, so good research. My parking space, so I ride my bike to work, or sometimes I'll take the bus. So I didn't need the parking space. It's right out front. It says reserved for mayor. So we added a little sign to it that says and friends, because my friends kept parking in it. But we said and friends, and then we put 2 benches and a couple flower planters, and we turned it into the smallest park in the city of Ithaca. And then Parks and Rec did something similar a couple years later, and I just got called Ben Wyatt for forever. So a lot of ice clown stuff. But it speaks to what Mayor Cognetti is talking about, which is if you don't set the tone from the top about, and it's not just about giving up something that was yours, but getting people to transform their mindset from. A lot of times, people, especially in government, will think that if they share their power, if they give away their power, they become less powerful. And if they share their privilege, then they move down on the totem pole. If they share their access, they lose something. But what I found is just the opposite. The more you share, the more you get. The more you give away your power, your privilege, your access, the more flows. It's a biblical lesson, but it's one that's true in government as well. And it is great. I mean, almost right away, you said I did this in about the first month of my first term. A couple weeks after that, the first protest was staged in my little park. And I was like, come on, guys. The sign says friends right there on the sign. But for the most part, you come out and there's people hanging out in the park. I get to talk to them. Sometimes they're just tourists, and I try and talk to them, and they're like, why is this guy? They don't even know that it's like a special park. They're just sitting in it, enjoying it. And they're like, would you not talk to us right now? But it is symbols. Those little symbols matter a lot and can start to set a tone.
Well, that's a great segue, Mayor Woodfin, into the way you've engaged in confronting symbols, because after the murder of George Floyd, you took it upon yourself to remove a Confederate statue, and in violation of, or in defiance of, the state attorney general. So that's not. It takes more courage to do what you did than it does to the parking spot thing. But the idea is the same, right? It's doing things that make a statement. Tell us about that.
I think one, it's important for people to realize that the city of Birmingham was not even a city during the Civil War. And so when you have second place trophies in the form of Confederate monuments in public squares that regulate Black people as a symbol to regulating Black people to being property as slaves, when you're in a city that's the 4th Blackest city in America, I think you have an obligation, again, sitting at the feet of my great grandmother, to listen. I was listening to the residents, and they were adamant to take the statue down. And I had to consider the consequences. And so it was the morally right thing to do. We talk about leadership in times of challenges and controversy. I think George Floyd's untimely, unfair death presented every mayor in America, not only related to engaging in how you deal with your police department and building trust with the community, but any symbols that deal with regulating people to second class. I had a moral obligation to remove that statue.
That's great, and props to you for doing that. And you absorbed some fines from the state government, but the people seem to rally around you. I don't want to go too far without recognizing what you get, the hand you guys have been dealt because COVID hit. And Mayor Cognetti, did I read that you didn't know up until then that you didn't even have a health department? How have you guys handled this major disruption, and how have you managed through this crisis?
I knew we didn't have a health department. That was something that we looked at on the transition last year ago, that, wow, this is something we need to figure out. This doesn't seem right that a city of 80,000 people doesn't have a public health department. I did not know, however, that 5 weeks into my tenure, we would be shutting City Hall, furloughing employees, and going home to basically lock down. So that's been an ongoing challenge. And here in Pennsylvania, it's been a true challenge. We do not get the data that we deserve and should get because we don't have a health department. The state of Pennsylvania will not share with us the detailed data about COVID patients and COVID deaths because we don't have a health department. And only, I think, 5 counties and 6 municipalities have them. So the majority, outside of Allegheny, Pittsburgh, and Philadelphia, the majority of Pennsylvanians are living in counties and cities without access to this data. And it's a bunch of legal hoops. And the legislature looked at it and said, we're not going to touch it. We're not going to let this data out. It's all to say that there's huge structural problems in all of our layers of government. The most that we can do, Mayor Woodfin and Mayor Myrick in their cities, and what I'm trying to do here, and so many of our other mayor friends around, we're trying to just piece it together, work with, hopefully when we have governors that are working with us. I've been lucky that Governor Wolf is working with us. Not every mayor has that. It's shown the cracks, and it shows how much we need to do to get those layers of government to work better. But at the local level, it's on us. And so we have to keep doing everything we can every day to make sure that the right information, at the very least, is getting to our citizens.
Let me get some specifics from all of you in terms of that level of creativity. The one program I can think of and that you've done, Mayor Woodfin, that seems creative to me is your Birmingham Promise. That was you marshaling a bunch of different stakeholders together and doing what?
It's simple. I think if any of our cities are going to change, we have to make the requisite investments in our youngest generation. And so for us, that was twofold. I go back to when I was working at that grocery store. I left high school early my junior and senior year, received credit hours for working, but got exposure in the form of customer service. And so for our young people, I thought it was cool if they could all leave high school early, receive credit hours for working, but be exposed to a career or a corporation or a job that they have interest in post high school. In addition to that, make a livable wage of $15 an hour, because when we talk about livable wages, you want to be creative enough. The second piece of that, quite simple as well. When those same high school students that were working walk across the graduation stage, they'd be afforded the opportunity to go to college, a 2-year, 4-year state school, tuition free, no questions asked. Live in the city limits, graduate from high school. We don't care about your ACT score. We don't care about your GPA. We only care about making sure if you want to go to school, you can go and you can afford to go and stay in.
I love that because you got the corporate community to step up on that and really open up. It's primarily funded by the private side. I know the city budget contributes, but I'm wondering from you guys, have Mayor Myrick and Mayor Cognetti, have you made similar inroads in public-private partnerships?
Yeah, for sure. And in several different aspects. I'll tell you that the benefit of being in a college town, especially with an institution like Cornell University, means a lot of things, right? It means that there's a lot of know-it-alls and a lot of, they say PhDs or people who know. They learn more and more about less and less until they know everything there is to know about nothing at all. Because to go back to your last question, what is it like to be a mayor right now? It's very similar to being a mayor all the time. You find in the federal government that there's so much power, but so little responsibility. That the president, these senators, they don't have to go to the grocery store. They don't have to face their constituents. They can just blame if something doesn't work right, they can say, well, it's the Democrats' fault. It's the Republicans' fault. You can't do that. I mean, Mayor Cognetti, Mayor Woodfin, I'll tell you, if at the grocery store, if you tried to pull that, nobody wants to hear it. Nobody wants to hear it. When they say, why isn't there a stop sign? Say, well, I tried to, but the Democrats, no, you're done. They want results. That's why there's 3 political parties in America: Democrats, Republicans, and mayors. So unlike the federal government,
I like that.
unlike the federal government, where you have so much power but too little responsibility, we often have too much responsibility and too little power. So who has to manage a global health crisis, economic fallout, racial injustice, and uprisings in the street? It's not President Trump. I mean, he was chomping at the bit saying, let me send in the National Guard, yeah. Each of us actually have to manage police departments through this, manage local economic development. When storefronts close, it is on us. And the blessing in Ithaca has been that not just having the university, but having a great staff, being able to recognize when you don't have the answers. As I, 12 times a day, I just am at a complete loss for words, but my chief of staff, Dan Cogan, my city attorney, Ari Levine, my executive assistant, my police chief, my fire chief, my city clerk, are all excellent. And when that fails, we go out to the broader public. So when COVID hit, we didn't know what we needed, but the experts at the national level, Dr. Fauci, saying testing is going to be a big deal. So we bought a machine. Cornell bought 3 machines that process these test results. The county bought one, the hospital bought one. We're now the testing capital of America. I mean, we do 1%. Small city of Ithaca, it's a fairly small city in upstate New York. We're doing 10% of all the tests done in New York State every day, almost 1% of all the tests done in America every day. And because of that, we've kept our infection rates, even as they're climbing right now nationally, we've kept our infection rate down, because when you test that much, you can trace. Just for perspective, if the federal government were testing as much as the city of Ithaca is right now, they would be giving out 300 tests for every one they're doing.
Wow.
300 to 1 ratio. And we would have a better handle on the pandemic right now. So that wasn't the local government figuring it out. It was a partnership with the private sector, the public sector, the university. And that's what you're actually forced to do quite a lot in this job, because we don't have all the levers we would need to solve the problems on our own, right? There aren't buttons on our desk that say improve the economy. So we have to work with those private partners.
That's a great point. And Mayor Cognetti, have you found that in Scranton?
That's what we've been trying to do throughout. I mean, having the crisis basically be my entire tenure, I see us as a resource hub we provide, provide services to keep people safe. B, we provide resources to keep people healthy. So we've just been pumping out in every way we can what those resources are to keep people safe and healthy. And in that way, I mean, I think we are a convener. We don't provide social services ourselves, right? We don't provide food, security services ourselves, but we can absolutely partner with all those organizations and make sure that people understand that they can go to the city to find out where they should go. So the public health crisis has really accelerated, I think, our repositioning of how the city of Scranton is here to help. And that's been really, a bright spot, I think, for all of this. And that's from a business perspective with private pieces and nonprofits. But it has really accelerated those relationships that, I would form over time, but the immediacy of our need to partner has been so clear so quickly. And I think that is going to be having a lasting positive effect.
I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up the issue of policing. And Mayor Woodfin, we've talked about this before. How are you handling, and I know you invested more in police officers. How are you handling the defund the police complaint that or line of thought that we're hearing politically? At the same time, as you said earlier, your number one priority is to keep the populace safe.
I think I handle it with honesty. It's not a popular conversation if you have people in the room who they're very passionate about defunding. I think the thing about it is the people I run into at neighborhood meetings, the residents and the seniors I run into, they're equally as loud. And you know what they say? We want more police. We want more police presence. And so you have, I won't call it a generational divide, but there's a generational difference in requests. And I think overall, as the mayor, as mayors responsible for police departments, whatever everybody wants costs more money. If you want to defund the police and you want other people to show up in place of police, that is actually more expensive than police. People who have PhDs or people who are trained in social work, or any other type of person that's a non-police officer is going to cost money as well. And so it's not a matter of what bucket you put it in, police department here or there, whatever you want costs more money. If the residents want more police, that also costs more money. I think the bottom line is this. I think what all of residents want, whether it's whatever generation they're in, everybody wants more accountability. Everybody wants more transparency. Everybody wants more of what happens from a process standpoint if you have a bad actor via a police officer that's out of scope of their duty. And so we created a task force that had a 90-day window to bring back a citizens-led task force, that had every role and right to take a deep dive into our police department, peel back all the layers, our policies, our procedures, disciplinary actions, and recommendations how to go forward. I know at the highest level, the top recommendation will be a civilian, some form of civilian/citizens oversight board that I will probably say what's the next step to make it happen. So that's something I agree with. But the other thing is policies and procedures internally to make our police officers more accountable. The transparency piece of sharing information if there are disciplinary issues that need to be shared with the public, as well as many other things to continue to build trust between community and police.
That's a great response, and it's something we're dealing with here in Philadelphia. Mayor Myrick, what about you?
Careful. What Mayor Woodfin said is right. I mean, who doesn't want to live in a world where police are not necessary, right? But to get to that world costs more than the cost of a police budget. I mean, you'd have to end homelessness, which we could do by building oodles and oodles of affordable housing. You'd have to come up with an alternative to the war on drugs, which is a public health and safety approach. You'd have to have real gun control and gun safety in America. You'd have to have way, way better healthcare, particularly mental health care. All those things, you could roll up your police department, multiply it by 100, and you're not going to get the kind of money you need to pull those things off. So I would just encourage people to be careful from, if something sounds, avoid simple sounding solutions, right? Whether it's on the left saying defund the police will be safer, that's how you end police violence. Or if it's on the right, you say build the wall. Something sounds simple, it's not going to, I almost swore Philadelphia. It's not going to work. You have to, the world is complex and these solutions are complex.
Great point. I want to close with one final question to all three of you. And I really appreciate you taking the time. This has been terrific. Politics, it occurs to me lately, I'm done voting for on-the-job training. Like, politics is a discrete skill. And I wouldn't go to a plumber with a medical condition. And I'm believing, I'm more bullish on the fact that that politicians can get things done in politics. So what about the rough and tumble of politics? Didn't you know going into this that you wish you did? And as a way of like maybe advice to a younger person than you who might be looking at a career in politics. Mayor Myrick.
Sure. When I met Mayor Bloomberg, he said, I was already mayor, but he goes, I was 24. He goes, he said, you want my advice? He said, before you become mayor, become a billionaire. I was like, oh, that's very good advice. I know I'm forgetting something. What advice, especially at that age? I mean, first, the forces against you are not as deep as you think they are. They're not as powerful. They're not as smart. They're not as strong as they think you are. They can't knock on more doors than you can. They can't learn faster than you can. You can do this. People do it. If I can do it, you can do it. It's doable. That would be the first advice I get. The second would be to treat it like a job, that this is not a piece of entertainment, right? You don't get into this if you want to just have a title to wear it around. President Obama said, you don't run for office to be someone, run to do something. But the one bit of it, I'm not sure if it's advice, but it would be a caution, is that this is a very different time than even when I started 13 years ago. Social media is a very toxic influence on our politics, and can and at the higher levels it's worse, but people are more insulated from it. I run all my social media accounts, which means that when I wake up at 5 a.m, the first thing I do is look at notes. No, I look at my phone and there are like notes of people calling me an asshole. Like, that's how I wake up at 5 a.m. And before I go to sleep at night, it's people like, that guy's a jerk. And it's unless you have some, I would encourage people to build resiliency skills. Therapy is very good. Therapy is great. The church is very good if you can, if that's your bag. Family, friends, folks that you can wrap around you, because it just is nasty. They can't stop you from doing your job, and they can't stop you from winning, but they can make you feel bad. And I have quite a lot of friends who've been drummed out of this work, even though they were succeeding, and even though they were popular, and even though they were getting reelected, because a few trolls did a good enough job making them feel bad about themselves.
That's great. I'm with you on the therapy front. Mayor Cognetti, what about you? Have you been seeing a shrink?
I have not, but it's on the list.
That's some second term stuff. That's some second term stuff, Mayor. When your second term, you'll get there.
Second.
I think that one of my pieces of advice, or just the way that I approach all of this, is run for the job that you want. I think part of the problem that we have in this country is you have a bunch of state legislatures and a Congress full of people who just are trying to get to the next thing, and they don't actually want the job that they have. And that's where you get into trouble. That's where you get a bunch of legislators who aren't doing anything because they don't actually care about putting legislation together and policies together that will help people, right? Like, if you want the job, go get that job.
Mayor Woodfin, take us out by dropping some wisdom, but no pressure.
I think the question was kind of two-part. What didn't you know before you got this job, and then kind of what would you advise? So I would go back to what Mayor Myrick said: culture eats strategy any day. I did not realize the extreme uphill battle of trying to change a culture for the better, trying to incorporate values to make government work for the people you serve. And so I would share with people who want to be an elected position, who want to be mayor, be patient with yourself, be patient with the system you inherited, and don't govern with the clenched fist, govern with an open hand, because you need to learn how to adapt and maneuver to get to the things you want. Second thing I would say is I realize I have an overwhelming amount of empathy, wanting to solve problems for people who are hurting. And I'm like, damn, all other elected officials aren't like me. That's not everybody. So please embrace that everyone will not be like you from the standpoint of how you want to govern and how you view issues, problem solving for people. And the third thing I would say is this, and it's just advice. Empathy is extremely important. I think we spent the last 4 years with the leader at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, totally lacking in that area. And I think it had a ripple effect of, I guess, fear beating out hope in our country. And if anything is going to change at the local, state, or federal level, hope has to beat out fear. That being the case, lead with empathy, always. Every decision you make on behalf of people, never stop leading with empathy.
A special thank you to our sponsors.